Every empire that tried to erase the Jewish people from history is gone. Assyria, Babylon, Rome are all dust. Yet 4,000 years after a single covenant in the ancient Near East, this people endures. Scattered across continents, surviving conquest, persecution, and genocide that should have ended their story a dozen times over. How does one people outlast every force bent on destroying them? That answer begins with a promise. According to foundational religious tradition, a nomadic shepherd named Abraham received a divine covenant in the ancient Near East, promising his descendants a homeland and a destiny. While archaeological evidence does not verify these patriarchal figures, this faith-based narrative establishes the community's spiritual lineage. The promise passed down to his son Isaac, and then to his grandson Jacob. After wrestling with an angel, Jacob received the name Israel, and his 12 sons formed the ancestral framework of the 12 tribes. When a severe famine struck the region, this growing clan migrated to Egypt to survive. This relocation began the first major displacement in their history. Settled in a foreign land under Egyptian rule, the family faced a vulnerable existence, beginning a long era of growth and survival that would forge their distinct identity. This vulnerable existence turned to outright servitude until a leader named Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt, a departure preserved in collective memory as the Exodus. At Mount Sinai, this migration transitioned from a flight from slavery into the birth of a nation. Here, the transmission of the Ten Commandments established an ethical system of laws where moral duty was tied directly to divine command, a concept that would eventually shape global legal systems. For 40 years, the harsh desert environment tested their resolve, forcing a loosely associated group of families to forge a unified national identity. Following this period of trials, Joshua led the tribes across the Jordan River into the hill country of Canaan. There, they established agricultural villages, forming a decentralized tribal confederation bound by a shared covenant, laying the foundations of the first recognizable Israelite society. To defend against external threats, the decentralized tribes unified under their first king, Saul, establishing a centralized monarchy. His successor, David, captured the Jebusite fortress of Jerusalem, using its water conduit to bypass defenses and secure the hilltop city. David made Jerusalem his capital, uniting political power with sacred authority by bringing the Ark of the Covenant to the new royal center. He reinforced the city with a monumental terraced stone platform known as the Milo. David's son, Solomon, solidified this administrative center by constructing the first temple, establishing a permanent sanctuary that anchored the nation's faith. Under his rule, the kingdom reached its peak in wealth and prestige. However, upon Solomon's death around 930 BCE, heavy taxation and tribal rivalries fractured the state into two competing nations, the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah, leaving both vulnerable to future conquest. In 722 BCE, the Assyrian Empire swept through the north, conquering the kingdom of Israel and deporting its population. Over a century later, the southern kingdom of Judah faced its own destruction. In 586 BCE, the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar captured Jerusalem, blinded the rebelling king Zedekiah after executing his sons, and burned the first temple to the ground. Driven into exile in Mesopotamia, the Judean elite forged their collective trauma into survival, compiling the sacred texts that defined their identity. This displacement ended when the Persian king Cyrus conquered Babylon in 539 BCE, issuing a royal decree that permitted the exiles to return. Under Persian administration, the returning community rebuilt their sanctuary in Jerusalem. Completed around 516 BCE, the Second Temple stood once more at the heart of Judea, establishing a physical anchor of continuity and cultural endurance. Under Persian administration, Judea functioned as a self-governing province, its autonomy preserved through local satraps and administrative seals. This relative stability shifted in 332 BCE when Alexander the Great conquered the region, introducing Hellenistic culture. Decades later, the Seleucid ruler Antiochus IV Epiphanes attempted to forcibly unify his empire, banning circumcision and Sabbath observance in 167 BCE. This systematic suppression sparked an armed uprising in Modian, led by the priest Mattathias and his son Judas Maccabeus. The rebels reclaimed Jerusalem, purged the temple, and rededicated the altar, an event preserved in the festival of Hanukkah. Though independence was eventually curtailed by Rome in 63 BCE, Herod the Great later transformed the sanctuary. Beginning in 20 BCE, Herod expanded the Temple Mount with massive retaining walls, creating a monumental complex that drew thousands of pilgrims, cementing Jerusalem as the spiritual heart of the Jewish world under foreign rule. In 66 CE, simmering tensions erupted into a full-scale Jewish revolt against Roman rule, ending in catastrophe. Roman legions under Titus besieged Jerusalem, breaching the walls and destroying the Second Temple in 70 CE. This loss of the central sanctuary threatened to extinguish the faith entirely. The devastation deepened decades later when the Bar Kokhba revolt from 132 to 135 CE failed, prompting Rome to banish Jews from Jerusalem and accelerate their dispersion across the Middle East, North Africa, and Europe. Deprived of a physical temple and homeland, the community adapted. Scribes, sages, and local synagogues replaced the centralized priesthood. Through the systematized study of oral law, codified in the Mishnah, a portable framework of faith took root. This transition to rabbinic Judaism allowed communal life to endure and flourish in any corner of the earth. This geographic dispersion transformed exile into a global network of intellectual centers. From the academies of Babylonia and North Africa to the kingdoms of Spain and Europe, Jewish communities established enduring centers of learning. Scholars expanded their work to include medicine, astronomy, and philosophy. In the 12th century, the Spanish-born philosopher and physician Moses Maimonides epitomized this intellectual peak. Writing in Egypt, he synthesized Aristotelian logic with religious law, authoring the Mishneh Torah and the Guide for the Perplexed to reconcile faith with reason. As these communities adapted to their local environments, two distinct cultural branches took shape. The Ashkenazi tradition grew in the Germanic lands of Central and Eastern Europe, while the Sephardic tradition blossomed in the Iberian Peninsula, developing their own liturgical, legal, and linguistic heritages. By the late 11th century, rising religious and political hostility threatened Jewish security across Western Europe. Beginning in 1096, the Crusades brought violent massacres to communities in the Rhineland. Over the next 4 centuries, monarchs systematically expelled Jewish populations to seize assets, forcing tens of thousands to flee Spain under the Alhambra Decree of 1492. In Eastern Europe, the 17th century Khmelnytsky uprisings brought devastating violence to regional shtetls. Yet communities endured through local self-governance, organizing the Kahal to coordinate security and manage crisis diplomacy. By funding yeshivot to preserve literacy and establishing regional charity networks, Jewish communities maintained a portable framework of law and faith, securing their survival through centuries of displacement. By the late 19th century, rising European anti-Semitism prompted a turn toward national self-determination, championed by Viennese journalist Theodor Herzl. This political Zionism triggered waves of migration to Ottoman and British Mandate Palestine. Yet the mid-20th century brought unprecedented catastrophe. Nazi Germany systematically murdered 6 million European Jews in the Holocaust, a genocide revealed in full horror upon the liberation of the camps. In 1948, amidst international support and intense regional conflict, the State of Israel declared independence. The new nation absorbed hundreds of thousands of survivors alongside Jewish refugees fleeing or expelled from Arab lands, reshaping the country's demographics. Guided by the linguistic efforts of Eliezer ben Yehuda, Hebrew was revived as a spoken national tongue. Today, while global Jewish communities continue to thrive worldwide, Israel has established itself as a modern center of technology, culture, and scientific achievement. Today, this heritage is far more than a testament to survival, and it is an active partner in human progress. Through enduring values of justice, literacy, and community, this ancient journey continues to shape our global future. If this story inspired you, please subscribe and join the conversation below.